So today is a very special day. We are here with Rachel Hutchisson, VP Global Corporate Responsibility at Blackbaud. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here with us.
Hey, Sheryl, thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And when we were talking about earlier, and before we hop into the main content from today and really talking about, we know that relationships are really important to you and how to really build belonging in this remote world because it's so important. It's really seems like it's really strongly related to retention, which is an important topic that everyone's talking about today and just really dealing with. But before we get to that, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to shift, from marketing to social responsibility, and it maybe even taking it back a little further and talking about as being one of three kids and where the pecking order was, how that influenced you as well.
Yeah, sure. So I am one of three. I'm the youngest of three girls, and my father is a retired college professor. And I was the young, energetic. Yeah, I got to keep up. I thought I was just as old as my sisters were, and when you've got three kids around, you try to make sure you got the food that you want on the table and you got your word in and all of that. But I was raised in a family that was very involved in community, and I didn't really know that, realize that, because you don't realize until you kind of look back and you say, oh, wow, like my parents had a community garden in the 1970s, and they were recycling and they cared about the environment. And well, my dad took us all overseas, when I was 4 and 5 years old, and I lived in a different country and I got exposed to what that was like. And that all of those experiences, the living in a household that was deeply tied to community and service and volunteerism without it even really being, it wasn't like a headline conversation. It was just something that my parents did. And then living in a different culture in the early 1970s, and that just being something that I experienced absolutely I now realize formed the journey of where I am today. It doesn't mean that it was like this direct route, because in the middle there was the go to college, go to grad school. Oh my goodness, what am I going to be? And I started in marketing, and um, the I was in marketing and I was doing these jobs because the company was smaller, and I that was just the role that they needed me to do, and I was relying on my writing and editing skills, and eventually said, wait a minute, I really want to take on our philanthropy and our community, because I started seeing that it really kind of spoke to me. So I went on this evolution as the company evolved into being a bigger company. So the two I started where the job was, where I could be employed doing something. And then I started thinking, what really speaks to my heart? And what do I want to be when I grow up? It took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah. And so I just want to really highlight what you said is that I want to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Sometimes that happens at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I mean, so what I'm hearing is really give yourself permission if you go down one path and think that you might want to pivot somewhere else.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I vividly remember coming out of grad school, and I went straight to grad school after college, and in panic, like in tears, with my graduate advisor at dinner, asking him, what am I going to be? Like, what am I going to do? What job am I going to get? And I graduated during a really difficult economic time. It was hard to get a job in the field that I just newly minted, got out of graduate school in. And he's like, don't worry about it. You just take care of the next step. And that's what I tell my kids now. All that matters is the next step. They're just coming out of college. Just take that next step. Your journey will unfold. And here I end up at a tech company that, when I was in college, people didn't talk about joining tech companies because it just wasn't the moment yet. And I ended up in this place where these new roles were kind of unfolding around me. So I just kind of went on that, I don't want to say I went on a ride, but I evolved in a system that I didn't realize I was going to be in. And then I kind of let it happen to me, learned a ton. But then I got to this point where it's like, this next step on my ride is not the one that is right for me. It doesn't feel right. I could try to do it, but that's not me. And
Mhm.
I was probably in my mid to late 30s where I said, what is it that makes me really happy? What do I want to do? And I evolved and was able very nicely to be able to do this within the company because it kept growing and is very purpose focused and was the perfect place for me to be able to explore while also bringing a lot of goodness to the company.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And can you share a little bit about, when you were in grad school, sometimes we have conversations and we talked about this offline. Is it sometimes some people, maybe even the people that care about us the most, put labels on us or box us in, and it really impacts what we think we're capable of. And so can you share your experience and then a little wisdom or perspective if for anyone else that struggles with that?
Yeah, it's funny how we are affected by that and we don't realize how much. I am the third of three girls, so I'm the youngest. I'm 54 years old and I am the youngest, but I still think of myself in that order. But my sisters and I were only 4 years apart total from top to bottom. So it's not like we're all that different. But I was very quiet in high school. I was very athletic, but I was very quiet and I just kind of had my head down. I always was reading. If I was done with my work, I was always reading. I played sports mostly outside of the school system because I was a soccer player and there weren't girls soccer teams. I actually played on a boys traveling league for a number of years. And so that was all happening outside of the ecosystem of everything that was happening every day at school. And when I went to grad school, my college advisor, I got a BA in English. The English professor who was my advisor wrote this letter of recommendation and he gave me a copy. And it said, he was endorsing me for this, but he really appreciated that I was applying to go to the University of Missouri's School of Journalism for print journalism, magazine journalism, but not broadcast because I wouldn't be good at broadcast. And when in my late 30s, I started standing up and speaking in front of people. I've done a TEDx talk. I started realizing that I really enjoy that. But that whole stand up, have confidence, convey a message, land a message part of me, it just wasn't ready yet. And I had to decide, wait a minute, I might be nervous when I start doing this, but this actually, I can do this. And I see from the reaction of the people around me that they're hearing and valuing what I'm saying. So I started paying attention more to what I thought and what some very, very close trusted advisors who would say, like, Rachel, this is good. You should cultivate this skill. So I started deciding maybe who to listen to more versus the general view of who I was in the world. I think that's why like the idea of going back to a high school reunion like makes me go like, because
Mhm.
I feel like I'm such a different person, than I was in high school.
Yeah. So then for anyone watching, it seems like it's really important to be aware because sometimes we're not even aware of the labels that are placed on it. And sometimes, especially, with coaching, those are the things that get unpacked in coaching because it ends up being some resistance that we have to maneuver around. So good for you for maneuvering around that yourself. And it seems like it's a really important message to raise our awareness to any labels that either have been placed on us or that we've placed on ourselves.
Well, and sometimes you worry, you expend the energy to worry about things that maybe you shouldn't because you're inherently good at them. And I worked with an executive coach. The first thing that she did is say, Rachel, these are the things that are fundamentally true about you. And I know that because I've experienced this world that you're in and talked to people. And you can just relax and not worry about those things. Let's go work on the things that you might struggle with more or that you want to talk about. And it was so like validating and a relief to say, okay, good, I can, because it's weird to be thinking about yourself and feeling confidently. I guess maybe that's a female thing, that I can confidently know that I'm good about these XYZ things. It was a moment for me to say, okay, I'll just move from beyond that and I'll focus on this next set of things.
Yeah, that is so important. And the power, like a lot of the power of coaching is perspective. That was a perspective on yourself that you hadn't considered because it seems that sometimes not to make a broad generalization, but what I've learned in, working with female leaders and emerging leaders is that sometimes we tend to focus on what we haven't done, what we're not good at, and we don't acknowledge the mountains that we've climbed. And so I'm really
Exactly.
glad that you brought that up.
Well, yes, and she helped me do that.
Yeah. And so if talking about what you do and kind of melding it together with what I do, and you think about mental toughness and high performance, what mindset has allowed you to get to the position that where you are, to get on the stages that you're in, to have the position you have, to have the impact that you're having?
I thought about this because, as I noted, I didn't really have that mindset frame for a long time, and I had to get to the point where I realized that I needed to have it, and I feel like there was a switch in my life where I figured out that it was important to own my own journey. That's if I didn't do something well or I was struggling with something, to take it out and put it on the table and analyze it and own it and talk about it and get feedback on it, to ask for feedback versus waiting for feedback. That was a key moment to periodically ask leaders, how do you think I'm doing? How can I do this better? Versus just waiting and saying, well, if I mess something up, they'll tell me. Just getting more proactive about that ownership and the pride in yourself and the pride in the people who you think know you the best, who can, if someone is in an audience and you're speaking on a stage and that person knows you, and that what they say, you still want, because in your head what you think you're going to say, and then what comes out of your mouth might be different. You're like, I didn't go get it out. And hearing from that validating kind of accountability partner that, no, it was good, and this was what, hearing feedback from them real time, because you care about being good and better. So it's that ownership of your own journey, which is not, think about it, it's not really how we're raised or what the school system does to us. The school system is about always evaluating you and grading you, and that's outside in, not inside out. So it was like making that flip. And then
Yes.
acknowledging that I want other people to do that quicker than I did that.
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting point that I've heard before, but just mentioned in a different way. It seems like the school system grades people on how can you be as perfect as possible, not not from why don't you do your best and let's start from there and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, it's, the way, assessments and grading, it's all about, how you do on everything. And if you don't do well, it makes you feel bad. And so you want to do well and you want to get the good grade. And so it means that it's harder to take a risk that says, I don't care what I get in this class as long as I explore this new thing. And when I went through school and when I saw my kids going through school, there's this idea that when they're younger in particular, that you're supposed to be good at everything, and you're an A student, or you're not an A student and a C, you're an A student. It's across everything. Who do you know in life who is good at everything? Like, jobs do not require you, careers don't require you to be good at everything. They require you to have some special gift or knowledge that you add to the world. And what makes the world so wonderful is that we're all different and we have different skills and different views. And the lived experience is deeply important. Emotional intelligence and relationships are deeply important, not just what you got on the, physics test. And so it's this shift. And I think it's really hard. You see kids coming out of school and they might have been really great at everything and not great at life, or so good at life that they didn't get anything done. It's like, how do we figure out a mix there? What do you shine at? What do you just need to learn? I'm supremely glad that I do not have to rely on my physics knowledge in my job because I just got through that class. But yeah, it's really different. And I do see, my kids went to a school for a while that was very focused on outdoor education and leadership and community and the soft skills, the relationship skills that are deeply important in whatever role you have in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. And it kind of ties into what you said before, in that sometimes that's fluid and evolving. So for those of you who are listening and thinking of, oh, well, and maybe this is making you a little uncomfortable, but in a good way, because maybe you're like, I'm not quite in the right place because my gifts and my passion lie elsewhere, that you don't need permission, but permission granted to start exploring where your passion and where your area of genius really does exist to make a shift. And that first step is really, being aware of what that is. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to have a conversation with your younger self, say your 20 or 30-year-old self, and give her some advice, what would that be?
Oh, goodness. To worry less, but also to take more risks, to understand that looking back, I now know that it's not like you graduate from high school, we're all supposed to be at a certain level, and then you do college, and then you're done, and then you figure out what your career is going to be for the rest of your life. That's not really the way the world works. That you have these phases where different things are important to you, family, work, et cetera, but also different phases of career. And it's not like you start a job now at 20 and you do the same job for 40 years. I've been with my company for a long and wonderful career, but I've done a lot of different things, and it's evolved dramatically. And that evolution is actually exciting, not how you view it when you're younger. You're younger, it's like, what am I going to be when I grow up? Well, in some ways, I'm still figuring out what I'm going to be because I have a lot that's next. I would hate to think that I was done. I'm going to be done ultimately when I'm done, but that's, I hope, a long time from now. So you just get perspective. You don't ever stop learning. The older I get, the less I think I know. And that's a very freeing thing. But I also have confidence that I know that I can figure something out. I can go to the people around me to help me figure something out if I don't have that specific knowledge. And those two things kind of work together.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, my dad said, "Oh, you're going to be a lifelong learner," and at the time, that sounded terrible because I'm like,
"No, I'm done."
But now I get it. I get it for sure. So then it seems like you're trying to really express that it's important to take where you are today and, like I said, give yourself permission. Keep learning about what you're good at, and if you're at a crossroads, maybe permission to learn about something new or something new that you might like, that you might really be great at.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't make total sense.
Yeah, I would hate to think that we would ever stop learning, whether it's a new skill. This is going to sound silly, but during COVID, I was sitting there thinking I was walking so much that I was actually giving myself like pains in my heels. And I was like, I have to do something else. And the gym started opening up again. And I was like, I'm going to go swim again. I hadn't actually really swum laps for ages. And I have contacts, so I just stopped doing it. And now I'm like, I love doing this. I'm like, I don't want to be that person who stopped swimming once I turned 25 and I never did it again. Like, how do you get reacquainted with things that you used to do or get new interests? That's the joy of life, discovering like new food that you like. I just went to Seville recently, and I was like, why have I waited so long to come to this place and see these new things? Because that's a joy of life, is new experience and learning things every day.
Yeah, definitely. And so maybe think about, for anyone listening, one thing to experience that's new. And it could be in your personal life or it could be in your career, but just thinking about, especially if things in this remote world are feeling a little stagnant. Mm-hmm. And so that being said, DE&I is very near and dear to your heart, but what about belonging? We were going to talk about, especially in this remote world, can you talk a little bit about how we can foster belonging, especially when we are either hybrid or remote, or sometimes people get hired, they've never even met anyone. Mm-hmm. How do we if we are the new people, how do we foster belonging for ourselves and get proactive about that? And if we're leaders, how do we foster that for our team?
Yeah, and you can think of belonging specifically in a DEI perspective, but also it's a much bigger thing. And I worry about it a lot. I'm the kind of person who, what I do, I lead global social responsibility. I'm about how we actively participate in what Blackbaud calls the ecosystem of good, and show up as these active participants and connect with each other and engage as human beings. And we can do that on our own, but that's often done in community. And when you do it in community, you're also developing relationships with other people and connections and intersections. And that just feeds you. It's documented that actually giving and serving actually creates, positive endorphins. And then when you're meeting other people and you're just with them and it's joyful. So how do you do that when we're all sitting there on a screen? And there are things that my company has done a wonderful job of, we went virtual overnight and we all were trained. How do we be good engagement leaders in a virtual world? How do we make sure it's like the situations or conditions that already existed? People have lives. People have kids, people have pets, people have, situations, they have older parents. All of a sudden we could see all of that in the windows of our screens. We were broadcasting from home. We were not leaving it at home or in the car when we got to work. And so in some ways that's very healthy, but it also was very stress inducing for many people. Okay, we have this freedom, we're at home, we're seeing each other more, but oh my gosh, like this is intense. And so, focusing on that wellness is important, that taking time away from a screen is important, taking time to go outside and walk or exercise or just be there is important. And to really be thinking about like what you need and what you really need, like what you need mentally, what you need physically, so that you're not just sitting here in front of a screen all day, every day, which is exhausting. So, part of what we do is we try to connect people virtually in, fun ways, social ways, service ways. But I'm also like, how do I meet new people? Because sometimes they're announced and I'll say, oh, this person joined. And I'll say, hey, let's just spend half an hour talking to each other. We do things called coffee chats across the company. Or I now will see people announced on LinkedIn. They'll say, hey, I'm joining this company. And I'll just say, oh my gosh, great, I'm here. Hey, if you ever want to talk. And you just have to network in a different way. And then now that things are opening up more, I am all about not getting stuck in, okay, I've been working in this room and I've been here for 2 years. And now I'm so used to it that I never put real shoes on and I never go out. Well, when I get opportunities now, I realize I need to go out because I need that as a person. And it's actually harder, even though I'm a networking kind of person, it's exhausting to go back out, shake hands, meet people, talk to them. But then you realize, like, wow, I could not, I really miss this. So I've given advice to some people about, if you don't have you might work in a community where there are no other people from the company. Go find some group that meets and talks about tech or has a common interest and make time in your day to push back and go do that. Make sure you're doing something, because if you're not feeding all the things that make us human, it's like you're shutting down and desensitizing parts of yourself. So I think there are a lot of people who are open to those kinds of human connections. No, not a science, but I do work at it. I do intentionally ask people to meet in person, online. I say no when people ask if I can meet in the evening or later, and I've just done with the screen. You have to create your own boundaries. Mm-hmm. And do things that bring you joy when you're not working. Cause it's so weird. Like I used to just enjoy my house on the weekend, and now it's like, I'm here all the time. It's like, well, I've got to think differently about, I don't come into the room where I work on the weekend. I leave it so that that's where work is. So I can feel like I'm separated. Mm-hmm. I'm that person who used to like the drive home. I would listen to, a book or do something, and I would change my mental frame from work to home. And I don't have that journey anymore. So I've had to figure out, usually at the end of the day, I'll go outside, I'll walk, I'll go swimming, I'll do something to actually shift how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, so that I'm not taking what was work in 1 minute and walking into the kitchen and having dinner in another minute. That transition is hard for me.
Yeah, or maybe having a longer or bigger transition. Definitely. So it seems like for building this belonging, it seems like it needs to be really a lot more proactive, because you're not literally bumping into people at the water cooler, so to speak. And so, yeah. And then also being proactive about reaching out, to people internally, but also thinking about outside of your company, what kind of feeds your soul. Do you need to be around a lot of people? Can you join a group, either socially or, a similar interest group, or whatever vertical of business that you're in?
Well, my business is, the leaders in our business have talked a lot about wellness and encourage people to be vulnerable and to be able to say, you know what, everyone, I'm not going to go on camera today. I didn't, I need some downtime, or I need a break, really being vulnerable about where they sit at that moment. Because if you walked in and you saw me at work, you would probably be able to tell that my head wasn't in a good place, and maybe go off and take me somewhere and walk around and buy me a coffee and we could talk about it. But in this, it's like you get the link, you get into the meeting, you get the link, you get into the meeting. So you have to change your behavior, start with a little bit of, fun and humor and how's life, and, not, you just learn a different practice. Um, and you learn to use different tools to communicate with people, to replicate the chat and the quick things that you do, because you can't put everything in email.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like even something as simple as the first 90 seconds of a meeting, have it be a little bit more lighthearted or check in and not just immediately get down to business. So for everyone watching it, you shared so many gold nuggets of wisdom. Is there one thing that stands out that you're like, for everyone listening, just be sure to remember this? That will really
that's easy for me. Relationships are everything. I absolutely believe in my career that relationships are everything. You don't have to have a good reason why you will spend 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour talking to someone, connecting with someone, really having an authentic connection. But you meet someone, you like them, tag them on LinkedIn, you never know what that relationship will lead to, but they do. Really, relationships are how people find new roles. They're how they learn new things in life. They're ways that they just bring joy. And if you're sitting alone and working and not focusing on that, I think the world can be kind of lonely. But if you are, and you're connecting and reaching out before you're looking for whatever it is, the next thing that you want to experience in life, whether that's just an experience or whether that's the next step in your career, relationships are really important. It's like they're the foundation, I think, of having a happy network around you that's going to support you when things aren't great, and they're going to celebrate with you when things are really good. So today that means push back from your computer, shut the lid, go out, meet somebody, try to do something in person, spend some time getting to know people. And you'll be reminded that that's one of the huge joys of life.
Yeah, that's so important to go out and meet people. And just piggybacking onto what you said, maybe be a little less connected and a little more aware. I wanted to share a story about my son that did what you were saying. He lives and works in the city, and he was taking the Muni bus from the financial district back up to where he lives. And he noticed another gentleman that was studying for the CFA level 3 exam, which is, he worked for Morgan Stanley, so it's what he was studying for. And he said to him, hey, I noticed you're studying for the CFA. And they kind of struck up a conversation. And now they're friends. He went to housewarming, and he's a Division I tennis player. So after the housewarming, they're good cooks. So he's going to swap tennis lessons for cooking. And
what?
I mean, so it's not just the, work very specific.
No, it's about life. It's friendships. It's meaning. It's having someone different to talk to, getting perspective. It's, sometimes when you go and serve on a nonprofit board, it's like, I want to do this. I want to serve. It's valuable. It's going to help my career. And then the gain you get is, I just met 12 people who are interesting, and we all socialize out of work. And now I know people who are different in my community who don't all work with me. So my community is richer. It's a great part of life.
Yeah. So there you have it. In addition to everything else that you covered that was so, so very valuable, that relationships are everything. So maybe think about ways that you can foster more in yours and really connect more with those internally with your company, but also even externally, just to help give you a little bit more belonging in your community and also in your company. Rachel Hutchisson, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and I look forward to following your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.